So we are partnered. The Dear Business Coach podcast is now officially partnered with NordVPN. And you know what? Look out for the logo, some press releases, cool information. What in the heck is a VPN and how does it work? I'm really excited. I travel and now I know how to get the VPN security I need. So, Nord is now officially our affiliate partner. Look out for ways to support the show by going to the affiliate link I provide to you in your email and other places you can see it on the website. Thanks so much, NordVPN. Welcome to Dear Business Coach, the podcast. My name's Elizabeth Walker, your producer and host, bringing you exclusive spotlights, interviews, articles, free resources. This is Dear Business Coach, the podcast. Listen, follow, and the email subscription is at dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. Also, access the free magazine each week. All it takes sometimes is one little thing to move your business forward today. All right. Yeah. Good morning. And Patricia Stepler, am I saying your name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Well, how are you today?
I'm doing quite well, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, really thinking about the seasonal changes. It always invokes a mood.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to open with you with a couple of comments since we talked last. I was thinking about you, and I know that there were a couple of different ways that we could have gone today with your interview. So I want to make sure that I'm focusing on what's happening right now with you and what's exciting in your world that I could take advantage of. And of course, my friends that are listening are also waiting to hear. But why don't I ask you to introduce yourself, Patricia? How do you introduce yourself?
Okay, I work with business owners and I help them to get the results that they really want. And by helping them get the results, sometimes it's a matter of shifting their thinking, or sometimes it's shifting their actions because our thoughts and our behaviors control all our actions.
Now, I like this vocabulary word where you are thinking about behaviors and thinking about controlling our actions. This to me seems like something that I would hear from someone with a clinical background.
Oh, no, I don't have a clinical background at all. So I come from the education world. So I was an educator for a number of years and then I did corporate training. And one of the things I really discovered is that when when I started working with Bob Proctor and started to understand how the mind works, is that we change very little throughout our lives. And by about age 7 or 8, our personality, our self-image is pretty well set unless we do something to change it. And, so it has to be a conscious awareness that we want to change and a decision to go about changing. And what I found very interesting is that teachers in dealing with children, some of the issues that teachers have were the same issues that business owners and managers and supervisors had dealing with their employees. And so it goes to show that unless we're consciously aware of some of the behaviors and thought patterns that we have in our mind, we don't really change much in our lives.
Well, I think I'm not sure how to take that. I would do I is that helpful because now I can listen to you and think about that and it gives me power or is that a little bit depressing because here I am thinking that I was doing so much work and that my life has changed a whole lot. So this is interesting.
Then you're probably aware. Like if you feel like your life has changed and you're getting different results, it's because you are aware.
Mhm.
But a lot of people are not aware. And so let's go back to when you graduate from high school or college. Most people graduate and they have these big ambitions. And I always love looking at graduation cards because they're always like, live your dreams, go out, do things like that, which is wonderful. Don't get me wrong. That is
Mm.
absolutely wonderful. But then we get stuck in these ruts and we keep doing the same thing over and over again. And there might be a time where people will move, try to move forward and get out of their own way, or they have this really big dream, but they don't know how to go about accomplishing it, which is when they really need a mentor or a coach to work with. And, they may have that goal, but because it doesn't happen, and maybe they try it once or twice or three times, and nothing much changes in their life. And therefore they just think, okay, this is all there is. This is where I'm at. And that's not true. And that's why I want people to realize it is not true. You have so much more potential inside of you than you realize, but we do have to shift our thoughts and behaviors in order to accomplish that. Because everything you have today is because of your thoughts, behaviors, and your actions. So to move to another level, you're going to have different thoughts, behaviors, and actions.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. I can't really ever get bored thinking about the possibilities of what is it that I'm doing that actually is creating what's happening right now. I don't really know if, I fully actually, it's a question of control sometimes. Is it true that when I do this, X happens, or if I don't do this, this doesn't happen? So working with a coach is really helpful because it's hard to see that on your own sometimes, is it not?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I missed that opportunity so many times earlier in my life. I had the chance to work with a coach and I was like, no, I can do it myself. I can read this book. I can follow this, video series or whatever it was at the time. And I don't think we realize that, we live with ourselves all the time, 24/7. And we don't always see what other people see in us.
Mm.
And unless we start to understand how to really break down, like, where did those thoughts come from? Where did I start that behavior that isn't serving me well? And some behaviors we have are really good and they help us a lot. And they keep us from being, thinking so much. But we do have behaviors that don't serve us well. And how can we change that? About 90% of our day, we're just on an automatic pilot. So
Right.
if we're on automatic pilot, are all those automations in our head really helping us?
Right. It takes a little bit of work to discern those things. And let me go back here. So I want to maybe get a little bit of some I want to learn a little bit about how you see what you were mentioning a minute ago. Education, you have an educational background, and I think you mentioned to the effect that what educators experience with children is not too different from what leaders might have in their experience with employees, managers, teams. So okay, that kind of makes sense. I also am thinking about how a lot of us, myself included, have to think about maybe what are these parts of us that are kind of childlike, right? When a behavior is because uh, we've always done it this way, or I'm emotionally used to, or I emotionally react, handle things in a certain way by habit. And that's the kind of thing that makes me think, are there some childlike behaviors that I haven't really thought of as childlike? So the way that I am giving you all of this feedback and bouncing words back to you is to say, what is it that you notice? What is something that we can see or recognize in ourselves that is similar between teacher and a student and a leader and a team member.
Yeah, well, I think it all goes back to our personalities.
Okay.
And, you know, our perception. A lot of times, so we live through our senses. We interact with the world through our senses, the things we hear, the things we, discover on our own. And sometimes we never look at some of our other, what we call higher intellectual faculties, like our perception. How do we perceive, and sometimes I say, well, it's because I'm a Libra that I see all sides of things. I don't know that that's true at all, but because I think I've really developed my perception. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't even think about. Like we get so locked into our own thinking and our own way of doing things, and our way is the best way. And sometimes we, when we interact with people, we don't look at where they're coming from. And I think this was pointed out to me when I went to this training. It was a disc training. And I made the comment, we were in small groups. I made the comment, I said, when we were young, we grew up, blah, 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 blah. And this lady looked at me and she goes, you have no idea how I grew up. And when she shared her story, I'm like, she was exactly right. The way she grew up was so different, and her experiences were, almost horrifying. Like I couldn't believe, I felt bad for her that was, the situation she grew up in. And that started to, help me really understand that we can't just assume and just, put our perception on other people. And when we start to understand others, then it helps us to have better relationships with people. And that was something when I started to understand, like the first time I had a disc profile done, what I was, probably 10 years into teaching or something. And it was the first time I really understood myself because I was like, oh, now I understand why I do the things that I do. And I understand why I sometimes don't relate to some of the other faculty members in the building because our thought processes were so different. We were just totally different personalities. And that really helped me in dealing with children. If I had a difficult child in there, and, then I started to dig into, well, where are they coming from? And sometimes it was their home life, sometimes it was their attitude. But when I could start to unlock, what was going on in their lives that were causing them to behave that way, is not that I excused their behavior, but I could understand and I could relate to them in a different way. And that's exactly what business owners and employees or managers and supervisors need to understand also, that they need to start to interact with people differently when they understand where they're coming from. And again, it doesn't excuse the behavior, it just is an understanding. And put yourself in somebody else's shoes. How would you feel if you were in that situation? And then you have a better understanding for, maybe why they say or do the things they do.
Hey, listeners, don't forget to subscribe to email if you haven't already. Do this at dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. And if you are a new subscriber, look for the magazine coming up. You can get a free download as a new subscriber. That's dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com. Thanks so much, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. Remember, you are a superstar. Yeah, easy. Yeah, sometimes I try to listen for when someone is doing that by saying something like, I can see where you're coming from, or I
Mhm.
understand how you might feel that way. And some of those some of those words are helpful. If I'm in the right place of mind, I can tell that that person is really intentionally wanting to connect with me, and that in and of itself makes a huge difference. And sometimes I feel like when someone says, well, I can understand where you're coming from, but I'm waiting for this but, and it just immediately changes my interpretation of what they're trying to accomplish
Mhm.
with me in this moment. So I
I think that I think that the way that maybe we learn how to do this is really important. Do you help me learn how to do that? Like how to step into somebody's shoes? What does this process look like when I'm actively wanting to tell somebody I understand and now hurry up, I need you to do something differently?
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it's not that you're telling them what to do. Sometimes you are
Okay.
starting to understand where they're coming from, and maybe it impacts what you're going to do. So it's a two-way street. But when I help other coaches or business leaders, we try to get into really thinking about the other person too. And sometimes it is bringing them along, and sometimes it is trying to get them to change their perspective, but sometimes it actually changes our perspective. And, and we start to understand, we learn from each other. And I think that is in itself is really important that we realize there isn't just one way to do something. There's always multiple ways to do something. And sometimes you have to adjust, and you might find a better way by listening to somebody else.
Yes. Well, I mean, this is incredibly encouraging. What about the idea that you are, so wait, let me think what I was just about to say. What do you mean? Maybe I'm not trying to get somebody to do something. That kind of made me laugh internally because that's my
Mhm.
first thought as a bit. If I'm a business owner, as a business owner, I'm here to help. I'm here to see my vision of the business and hopefully bring the team along with me in successes and hopefully uh, create great relationships. I don't know that everybody feels that way, but I do.
Mhm.
Again, I guess I'm hung up on this idea that, well, we have a business to run. I have a customer who needs something. I have a service that has to be provided. Whatever these steps are that have to happen today, if I am as a leader, um, taking time out of my work day to sit here and think about where you're coming from, what your thought processes might be that are different than mine. This is a lot like trying to step into the world of psychology. Do you work with business owners who already have a predisposition that want to create this kind of culture in their business?
Not necessarily. Sometimes
Hmm.
I do. It depends on, if I'm working with an individual or working with a small business, s- it's often different. But, if you have a really big goal and a really big dream, you're going to have to become somebody a little different. And when you tap into, like, as long as you're allowing the outside world to impact you, you're just like a plaything for
Hmm.
the world. And you're just, moving like everybody else. And if you want to get out of that and you want to create and live in a reality of the dream life that you have in your mind, you're going to have to start tapping into some other parts of your thinking, like your imagination, like your perspective, like your reasoning, and you're going to have to start doing things a little differently. And when we start tapping into those higher faculties within us, we start becoming somebody different because we start to look at situations differently. I didn't always do this. This was just from training that I had, in these higher intellectual faculties. And, I used to react a lot. And now I just respond because I'm able to sit back and look at a
Hmm.
situation differently. And I see how other people may be thinking. And, I start to consider the fact that, well, they're people too, and they have feelings. And just because this is my thought process and this is the way I feel about a situation doesn't mean they feel the same way. Because we've all grown up with different experiences, and different things have happened to us, and different thought patterns, generational thoughts within our family, and been told different things. And so we're all different, and we're all unique. And so we have to take each other's uniqueness and help them to move forward.
Can you tell this is challenging for me? I think this is wonderful, and I love the there's something about you, and there's something about the sound of your voice that I can hear you, I can listen to you. Maybe it's just an affinity for you and your personality. I feel comforted by you somehow, so maybe it's easy for me to listen to you. uh However, this is really fascinating. I don't know that my upbringing really jives with this very well, because what you're saying makes sense. I'm trying to do this in my own life. I'm trying to think about this as in a business. And also, I'm so curious about people like you who are coming at this topic from a highly educated perspective and saying that you came from somewhere else previously as far as your thinking goes. And so this is a learned thing for you,
Mhm.
a learned
Absolutely.
practice. And what you said a minute ago, I'm taking notes because I want to hopefully pick up some of the things you're saying and use them, and I hope I get to pick up on everything. But actually, you said if you are, well, first of all, I wrote down react versus respond, because I understand those two words, sort of, right, but they are interchangeable, for me, like if emotion gets in the way. And also, you said if I am letting the world around me, again, I'm paraphrasing, if I'm letting the world around me just affect me all day long, then I'm just a plaything for the world. This is where I start to get confused about my own thought processes, is where I'm thinking about people, other people all day long. I'm thinking about you when this episode comes out. Is this going to be exciting for you? Is this going to do something for you in your work week and your work month? I'm thinking about my partner, what's he going through during the day in his work life. I'm thinking about my daughter, what is she going through during the day in her school life? And when you are thinking about other people a lot, that means that I'm experiencing possibly a lot of empathy. Maybe I'm thinking a lot about what is another person's thought processes and feelings and needs. And yet, how am I, how can I tell if that's really just me giving away my energy, not thinking about how I can be helpful in my business? I'm confusing being empathetic and thinking about other people versus this tool that I feel like you're trying to teach me how to think about, um, uh, in a more productive way, right? Am I somebody who is just at the mercy of everybody else's energy around me? Or am I actually being empathetic and productively thinking about what somebody else might be thinking, going through that day?
Yeah, well, I think when I'm thinking about reacting and responding, reacting is an emotional thing. And that's where I used to be. Something would happen and I'd get real upset about it. And I remember one of my coworkers used to say, "I can just see your curls flying," and it was like not really
Mm,
a nice thing to say, but it was like that's the way I was. I would just get very upset and reacting
mm,
that way. And once I started to learn about looking at these other perspectives and looking at how other people, I don't react like that. I mean, maybe occasional, but really am much more chilled and more calm. And I think that's the difference with responding is I take time to think before I say something, or I take time to think about, how somebody else is feeling. And so, even if one of my children or my husband comes to me and they're upset with something that happened, I'll often be the one saying, "Well, how do you think they felt?" And I think it's just that realization of stopping a minute and seeing how somebody else felt. But I look at the chaos in our world, And if you think of, chaotic situations, riots, things like that, those are people reacting. How many of them, if they really took time to think about it, would they do some of those things if they were really thinking? But we tend to allow the world to just kind of like suck us into, whatever situations going around us without really thinking, is this really what I want to do? You know, is this going to get me in trouble? Is this going to enhance my life or is this going to hurt my life? And, I sometimes see some of those things going on and I'm like, why are they doing that? Why, even smaller, why did that person say that to another person or a parent say something to a child? How is that helping that other person with what was said? And I think we just have to really take a minute and see how we're impacting others because the words we say can really impact the life of another one. And I saw this in children all the time that I taught, that parent that's yelling at their kid while they're getting off out of the car, going into the school. How's that helping that child to do a good job in school that day? And then you see the parent that's giving them a hug and telling them to have a great day. Look at the difference there between how those two children will go into a school. So, and that's the way we need to deal with people. How can we leave people with the impression of an increase? The idea that I'm making your life better because you came in contact with me. And that's where we need to get to. How can we, you know, make everybody feel better for having met you?
Wow. Yes. You said impression of an increase.
Yes.
That's a
I,
great
I I did not make
phrase.
that up. That comes out of a book, but it's talking about, helping everybody, to feel better about themselves. And isn't that why we're here? To encourage others, to make other people feel good. I
I
mean,
hope so.
that's what I want to, that's my goal. I don't want to ever make somebody feel bad because they met me. I want them to feel good because, you know, they've had some type of interaction with me that I can be kind to people, and I think if we did that, what could happen in schools with bullying? If we instead of talked about bullying, we talk about let's leave everybody with the impression of increase. Let's make everybody feel good today. What can you say to this other person? What would that make as a difference in our world if everybody thought about how anybody interact with today, I'm going to make them feel better.
Well, I know how to think about this in terms of sales, right?
Mhm.
Because I definitely want to create a relationship with a customer, with a potential customer, and I want to be the person that somebody wants to pick up the phone when that phone rings, right? And
Mhm.
I spend a lot of time listening to people talk about humor in business and how that helps and how that works. And I think you said another, you said also that you're interested in that other people's thought processes are different, that we come from different backgrounds, that we do have generational thoughts that are different. And it is easy to think, well, certainly that person understands what I mean when I say, let's move on from this task to that task, and that was difficult, and now we're moving on to the next one, and
Mhm.
it's going to be a great day even though we had a hiccup a second ago. And I feel like I can use those words. I can think about uh positive leadership and positive phrasing. What if the person next to me is that I'm talking to is my teammate, my coworker, and I say something as simple as, you know what, we made a mistake a few minutes ago that slowed us down. Let's just go on to the next task, and we're going to make this day fantastic. No big deal. What if that person, and maybe that person is me, maybe one of us is stuck? Maybe one of these thought processes is, well, we can't go to that next thing. We can't. Okay, I have for example, I have, in a podcast, social media project, and then I also have article print projects. And those are, sometimes you just have to It's not going to be perfect, but we have to get to the deadline for the next week.
Mhm.
And so, what if the person that I want to say that to is like, no, 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 right? It's not going to be okay. I am stuck here in this thought. I need to process through this hiccup that I'm having before I can effectively move to the next task. And so, this is where I get interested in you, Patricia. As a business, talking to a business owner, am I supposed to stop and work this out with this person right here in the middle of switching tasks? Is that like a part of how we do
Yeah.
this?
So that's kind of, as soon as you started talking about that, I thought about this one seminar I was doing, and it was a training for managers or something, I don't know. And this guy come in, he was a chef working in a restaurant or hotel, I'm not sure which. And I was going around the room and we were just like introducing, everybody was introducing themselves, and it got to him and he said his name. He goes, I don't know why I'm here. Well, I knew exactly why he was there because of his attitude. And, I tried to interact with him during the day. He was just angry that he had to even come to that seminar because he didn't think there was anything wrong with him. Well, obviously, there was some issue going on, and I didn't solve it during the day. But, sometimes you have to realize that maybe that person that's stuck is going to just want to be stuck like that gentleman was in my seminar who just did not want to move forward, did not think there was anything wrong with him at all. And, if you have a deadline, you got to go. You can't just keep waiting. So we also have to realize that we can't change another person. The only person we can change is ourselves. So the one thing you can do is you can interact with that person differently. And this is so fascinating in a couple books I've read, where different people, you interact with them, maybe like kill them with kindness type of thing. And the more you interact in a different way, you're eventually going to have to pull them around because as as you change the way you're dealing with that person, they're going to have to start changing how they deal with you. It just has to happen. So, it's sometimes
Mm.
that realization that, I can't change that person if they're going to sit there being angry. But what I could do is every time I interacted with him, I just did it so politely and so kindly. And while he stayed angry the whole day, it wasn't me that was causing that. That was him, and it's just you have to, and I felt that way with children too. In some, classes I taught that, that child maybe has so much baggage coming into your classroom, and I can allow that to continue by interacting with them in a more hostile way, I guess I'd say, and then it just makes me miserable and
Mhm.
it destroys the whole class. Or I can choose to interact with them in maybe a different way than what other teachers or other adults interact with that child, and therefore at least save my own sanity, which is the way I kind of looked at it. Did I want to have all that anger inside of me and be so upset after teaching that class, or did I want to be able to continue with the rest of my day? And so sometimes I had to interact with students in a different way so that it was easier for me. And as I did that, I would start to bring that child right along with me. And then we didn't have an issue, but it's just kind of, it takes some time. That didn't happen in one class. That happened over months, of interacting differently with somebody, but eventually you bring them around.
Do you think that and I have my own assumption of what your answer is going to be, but do you think that the other students in the class, assuming your children, I was about to say children, but the other students in the class would pick up on what you're doing and also help you react differently?
Yeah, sometimes they did. They definitely
Yeah.
did. And I wasn't trying to, like, I'm thinking of this one child I had, and she was a difficult one. And I think maybe at sometimes it might have looked like I was favoring her, but I think they all understood we
Mm.
were just trying to keep the whole situation calm so that everybody could have a really good experience in the class.
Okay, now this is another. Now I know that I have we're going over just a little bit, so I promise we'll wrap up in a second. I want to finish this thought here with you while we're talking about this idea of reacting and responding and changing the way that you or me changing the way that I am interacting with someone. And when I have somebody in my team, I know we were just talking about the classroom and that because that is a
Mhm.
fantastic analogy. And I'm so glad that you're here to say that it is similar in as adults in business settings, and I think that too. And I haven't had a coach say that expressly out in an interview. That yeah, we're kind of dealing with a similar dynamic.
Yeah.
So that's very telling, and I think I have it. I struggle with people who need attention and crave somebody to quell immediacy, right? So there's somebody who needs a constant answer, somebody who's like, what they're maybe now different from the example I was talking about a second ago, where somebody can't move to the next task. Maybe I have
Mhm.
somebody who can only just pop through a task. What's the next task? What's the next task? What's the next task? And sometimes that feels to me like that can be great, right? You want, and generally speaking, in a business situation, in a team situation, it's so helpful when somebody is saying, okay, what do I do next? Okay, what do I do next? What do I do next? That's very helpful. And yet sometimes that's also a personality tendency to need attention a lot, right? Why I need you to be talking to me constantly. I need reinforcement all the time about where I am in the project, what's next, how did I do last time, what are we doing next? And I feel like that is another form of like the way that I react to that person. What do I do if I want
Yes.
to satisfy that person and I recognize there's something I need to do differently with my management style here?
Yeah, and that's really understanding the four basic personalities, because there are some people that need that, attaboy, great job. And then there are people, like me, that I couldn't care less if you said, "Hey, you did a great job." Yeah, because I knew I did, it's like some people need that total reinforcement. And, if it becomes an issue, maybe you need to find another way of expressing, or rewarding that person that needs that attention. And, then you have other people that will just quietly just do the work and get it done, and they don't need anybody telling them they did a great job. And that's just understanding the different personalities.
Mhm.
And, sometimes, that's just the way they are. And if it becomes an issue, then you need to, sit down and say, hey, what can we do? If they're bothering you, perhaps by asking, how'd I do? How'd I do? You know, set up a guideline, okay, when you get done with this, then come see me, do this task, this task, this task, then we'll, check them or whatever, and so you have to have that balance. But sometimes they're not aware. They may not be aware. Maybe that's the way they've always been since they were a child. They just had to have, maybe they were given that attention, when they were little, and they just kind of grew up expecting, everybody to tell them how great they were, and, what a great job they did all the time. And, maybe they're not even aware that they're doing it because it's just become a habit and just so natural to them.
Yeah. Well, I think I have to let you go because I think
This has been fun. This
I know I'd like
conversation has
to
gone
invite.
different ways than usual when I do a podcast.
Yeah, well, yes, I'm sorry and thank you.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's really good.
So don't let me pass this by. What's your favorite way for people to contact you?
They can go to my website. I have some free offers. That's creatingtopproducers.com backspace home. Or they can contact me on social media. They can reach out to me on LinkedIn or Facebook. Just it's Patricia on LinkedIn and Patty on Facebook. So just
Oh, cool.
be aware of
Okay.
that
And Patty on Facebook and Patricia on it's
on
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
So the tools, the freebie tools, say the website address again.
Creatingtopproducers.com.
Type it in while I'm with you here. Creatingtopproducers.com
/home. Yeah.
/home. Okay. And so I'll and I can actually get some tools to start there, and I can
Tools
contact
there.
you.
Yes. And book a strategy session. Love to chat with you about, where you are and maybe develop that clarity, no pressure, but where a person is in their business and where they want to go to next and what kind of changes they might need to make within themselves to get them there. A lot of it's belief and, the actions because action reaction, that's, one of the universal laws. If you have an action, there's always a reaction out there too.
Well, I think I know about that, and yet I find myself constantly questioning, where am I in that link? Okay. Well, Patricia, thank you so much. And creating topproducers.com /home. And that way I can look at your freebies and also on LinkedIn and Facebook. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show, to the Dear Business Coach podcast. I forgot to tell you that's where you are today. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Join me live every Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, live on my LinkedIn profile to get the producer's notes. Those producer's notes are behind the scenes details, find out what mistakes I made this week, and get the link in your email or visit dearbusinesscoachpodcast.com /live. You've been listening to the Dear Business Coach podcast. My name's Elizabeth Walker, producer and host. Don't forget to subscribe to email. Thank you so much for being here, and find one thing today to move your business forward. Contact me at dearbusinesscoachpodcast @gmail.com. And as always, you are a superstar.